like people still kicking us down, you know. You're nothing. Well, I had to be something to go out there and cut that leaf stuff and load it in a darn box and send it on out to the state of Florida to go somewhere so somebody else can feed themselves. Even in the grocery stores or whatever. How can they say we are nothing when we was the one that was feeding America? We were not warned about pesticides when we was in the field. You could see chlorine, something or whatever on the bags, but we were warned to stay off that side. We had people in our neighborhood died of lupus, emphysema, sugar, cancer, all kind of cancer. You name the cancer, it's been in my neighborhood. And I think it's wrong for people to say, oh, it's no worse in your neighborhood than in somebody else's neighborhood. I mean, we were burying people like 13 and 14 people a week. It was some very hard times on the farm. My first job in the 60s was pushing crates in a chute for women that packing corn. That was a very hard job to do because you had women packing 1,000 to 800 crates a day, and you had to keep that chute full constantly.
How old were you?
I was 8 when I started on the farm.
8?
Mm-hmm.
Just about anybody could work for Charlie Grinnell. In a year's time, we would hire probably 100 people to keep the 27 in the packing house. We had the standbys. We had the grandmas and young girls who weren't in college, who either weren't in high school or out of high school and didn't have any skills. We used only prescribed pesticides. We only used prescribed fertilizer. It doesn't make sense to use more. That costs more money. And we only did what was legal. Toxaphene sold in the 70s for maybe $35 for a 5-gallon bucket of Toxaphene. It killed all the bugs that ate radishes. But it also killed fish if it got sprayed in the ditch. There were no fish in my ditch that I know of, but we still had to stop using it. So the product they gave us to replace it was a pyrethroid of some nature, but it did not kill the fish in the ditch. But if my man who was putting out the toxin, it would kill him.
What other forms of protection did you have to prevent pesticide exposure for them? Did they have gloves?
Well, we didn't. It wasn't required then. That's one reason why it wasn't required.
So a pesticide is any product or compound that is used to kill a pest, right? And many things can be used as a pesticide. And really what makes a pesticide is the toxicity. But there's nothing you can do about the toxicity. You are not manufacturing that pesticide, so that pesticide is going to be as toxic as it's intended to be. So the most important thing is to understand what that pesticide is and how to use it, and it's all in the label.
If you could say something to a current farm worker, what would you say?
To a current farm worker, protect themselves at all times and read the labels on whatever they're working in and whatever pesticides they gonna put on them or whatever. Ask and make sure it's not gonna be too harmful.
People that is licensed for pesticide application has to go through education in order to keep their licenses current. And that is a way that the Florida Department of Ag is trying to keep everybody informed. Now what happens on a daily basis in certain places, I don't know.
En el trabajo te ponen el video, pero en el video no te explica, nada más te dice cómo que tienes que protegerte y cómo puedes protegerte, pero no te dice qué pasa si no te proteges.
Echábamos un líquido, el líquido era blanco, no sé qué era, no, yo ni ponía, no ponía cuidado, entonces yo tenía que mojar los bonches allí y pararlos para que se escurrieran, mojar todo lo que hacían los hombres. Ahí trabajé 14 años. No me di cuenta hasta que me empezaron a salir ronchas. Me empezaron a salir unas ronchas y unas manchas que me empezaron a salir. Entonces yo iba a la clínica y no me dice nada.
Tengo unas manchas en mi cara, nunca se me quitaron. y me afectó el hígado porque también, pero tampoco, siempre me decían, tienes inflamado el hígado, pero nunca me decían nada de qué o por qué.
The clinical lab doesn't have a test that would permit us to regularly measure pesticides in the body.
So chronic long-term exposure to agricultural pesticides based on a weight of evidence is known to be associated with a variety of outcomes that can include autoimmune diseases, they can include cancers, and some of these outcomes can be profound and be multi-generational.
So, trabajé mis 9 meses de embarazo. Pedí permiso a la nursería 2 meses para poder estar con mi bebé. Entonces, cuando nació ella, pues parecía que todo estaba normal. Pero yo, como madre, yo la veía diferente, yo la veía rara, no sé. Entonces yo le decía a la doctora, es que mi niña la veo como si tiene una bolita en la cabeza. Y ella decía, no, pero, o sea, yo no le veo nada. Y le tocaba y no tenía nada. Y yo insistí, pero ellos todavía decían que no. Entonces me cambiaron en una cita, me dio con otra doctora que no era la doctora que siempre le tocaba. Entonces como al mes, mes y medio, le volví a decir a esta doctora, a la otra pues que no era la doctora de cabecera de mi hija. Le dije, yo le he dicho a la otra doctora que yo veo diferente a mi hija, que le miro como una bolita en la cabeza. Y entonces ella la tocó y dijo, ya como que sí le noto algo raro. Entonces le mandaron a hacer un CT scan. Entonces sí le miraron que su cráneo había cerrado prematuro y su cabeza era como un huevito, no era redonda. La enfermedad se llama craneosinostosis. A ella la operaron cuando tenía 4 meses, le abrieron una aquí y otra acá para romper sus huesitos y que su cráneo pudiera crecer normal. Entonces después de la cirugía le pusieron un casco, estuvo por 8 meses con ese casco para que le moldeara su cabeza.
Somebody was a farm worker and were spraying pesticides. To say, well, you need to work on a different part of the farm or something, get out of that environment. That would be probably wise advice, but not always possible.
Pero tampoco no te dan el material suficiente para tú protegerte. Entonces, muchas veces la gente tiene que comprar su propio material para poder, si tú quieres protegerte. Pero a veces la gente no tiene o no toma la importancia porque no sabe cuáles son los efectos si tú estás expuesta a pesticidas.
So many people around me have died since we've been off the farm. And I mean, they've been in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mean, more younger people died than it was older. Like 10 years after we came off that farm, people just went there. 13 funerals, 14 funerals, 15 funerals. So many people dying in the run of a week? Couldn't figure it out.
So oftentimes you can, in a very short, acute exposure, not see any of the typical modes of action, but instead you're seeing acute outcomes which could be much less severe and oftentimes confused with common cold. They could be confused with heat exposure, which is a really big problem in the Southeast. And so it's very difficult to, sometimes from a diagnostic standpoint, for a doctor to be able to really understand that this could be an acute pesticide exposure compared to a cold.
They just spray right over us, it's just like a mist of rain falling on you. And 2 or 3 days later, your skin go to peeling like you got an alligator skin or whatever. You go to the doctor, they give you a salve, but the salve is not any good.
What's key is for a doctor to be able to get a full case history of the patient in order to really differentiate between what might be heat, what might be a cold or flu, and possible pesticide exposure.
Pero ahí la mayordoma decía que no vinieran a la clínica, que les daban unas cosas para que se untaran, unas cremas, porque que eso era de los animalillos que había allí, decían que nos picaban, y era de los químicos.
maltratan muchísimo a la gente. Les gritan, los insultan, los amenazan y no hay mucho que hacer porque verbalmente pueden decirte lo que se les dé la gana.
I remember the time we been in the field and we can't get the orders out because either it's too cold or hot and we're trying to take breaks to try to cool off some, oh, I need my order and I need it right now. They talk to you harsh and oh, well, if you go home, you might as well stay home. It depends on who you work for. You have some good people and then you have some people that I like they just didn't care.
Y no hay nada que hacer. La gente tiene que aguantar por necesidad. Y es injusto porque, oye, si te están diciendo, hey, tú inmigrante, si tú no te apuras a trabajar o si no me sacas esta producción, te voy a echar la migración o te voy a correr. Y la gente no dice nada porque tiene miedo perder su trabajo, porque tiene una familia que mantener, porque tiene miedo que el patrón o el supervisor le ponga migración. O sea, es súper injusto.
Y casi la mayoría de las personas son personas que no tienen, son indocumentadas y por eso aguantan todo. Por el miedo de que las corren y que luego para hallar trabajo y que ese es el problema de la gente que tiene miedo. Porque yo les digo, si no tiene que ver que, porque aquí nos explicaban que tan derecho tiene uno como otro. Pero tienen miedo que se llegan a enterar los patrones y nada, ya no les dan trabajo. Por eso la gente aguanta.
Immigration. Immigration is the big issue that prevent workers to have proper health care and proper laws that protect them, and also the courage to demand better conditions.
Routinely, supervisor, bosses, crew leaders will say, you keep it up and I'll call immigration. And that is a fear, of course, people have. More recently, we've had more and more legal guest workers, but they're scared too, in a different way. Our guest worker program allows workers to be admitted to work, but only for a specific farm. And the farm gets to pick who comes back next year. So if you're a troublemaker, you're not on the list. And I want to come back next year because this is my one chance to come legally to the United States, not risk dying in the desert crossing the border. I get to go home and see my family at the end of the year and bring some money.
If a farm worker leaves one work site or one company, especially in small rural areas, all the growers know each other and they often blackball a person. So when a person wants to go get a job someplace else in that same community, that grower might have heard from Mr. Jones not to hire Jose because Jose's a troublemaker. So oftentimes, if a person tries to go get another job, they risk not getting a job at all in farm work because they've been labeled as a complainer or a troublemaker. Also, it's very difficult because workers are afraid oftentimes to go get another job because they don't know what that employer is going to be like, if that employer is going to ask for documentation, if the employer that they're leaving is going to try and report them to immigration.
Y el campesino es el menos que gana y el menos que tiene derechos. Por eso es la esclavitud disfrazada, todavía la tenemos, pero en diferente forma. Y los pesticidas es una cajita de Pandora donde hay muchas violaciones, pero no es como otra cosa que tú vas a la clínica y te digan, no, es por pesticidas y que sea aseguranza. Entonces eso pues es como una violación para los trabajadores también porque no tienen ese acceso a decir es de pesticidas nunca. Les dice tómese un Tylenol porque eso puede ser una gripa.
There were no real regulations to protect farm workers from pesticides until 1992. And even those regulations weren't implemented until 1995. And there were very bare minimal standards to protect farm workers from pesticides, which did not even give farm workers the same protections from toxic chemicals that almost all other workers have under OSHA. So we've been fighting for 20 years to get stronger protections for farm workers from pesticide exposure?
There are many different classes of pesticides, and some of the historic pesticides that were used 40, 50, 60 years ago, such as the organochlorine class of pesticides, have a very long residence time.
Because of the nature of pesticides, that most of the effects are long-term, won't show up for many years, the system doesn't really create much of an incentive for the employer to be safe with pesticides. And so for that reason, the court should allow us to go beyond workers' compensation to collect other types of damages.
Use less. I mean, then it becomes a social issue, a social and economic problem. It's not really a medical problem, I think, at that point.
But there's also a big problem because there's over 40,000 agricultural operations in the state of Florida. So there's a problem with enforcement because we don't have enough people on the ground to do that enforcement. There's a problem with compliance because sometimes the growers just care about getting the production out. You know, they just want to minimize cost. So they just push workers, or they don't provide the equipment, and there's oftentimes a misunderstanding, or maybe an on purpose misunderstanding about the real risks of pesticides to health.
Some of these compounds, pesticides, the organochlorines, have estrogenic effects. And so conditions, diseases that are influenced heavily by estrogen could be accelerated, okay, by increased estrogen from the environment, on top of the endogenously produced estrogen. Now, lupus is a good candidate for this because it's 10 times more, prevalent in women than men.
I have lost all my sisters but two. I got one Carolyn Stover here and one stay in New York, and myself. Out of 8 people, we're only 3 living. After I lost my daughter and my granddaughter, nothing can hurt me now. There's no more pain in me. I'm totally numb.
You're strong.
Yeah, that's what everybody tell me. When my daughter died, she said, "You're strong. I ain't seen you shed a tear yet. I ain't seen you stop yet." I'm going, I got to move on. I can't shut down. If I shut down, I lose my grandkid. And I really don't care what anybody say about what I say. Because I told the truth. I didn't tell no lie. I'm not the liar. I told the truth. I told what I seen, what I've been through, and what I know.